Hello, everyone. I am finding Brittany here. Brit, where are you? There she is. Good
Yeah.
morning.
Every time I do it right and on time, I just pat on the
Good
back.
stuff. Good. Yes, excellent. I gotta say thank you for pulling me out of my, like, today was my strategy session day. Today was my 2025 just getting really clear on some vision day, and
Ooh.
I needed to lift the head up. So I just love having these, and I'm so grateful to be here with you today.
Same here. Anything you want to share from that strategy session?
Oh man, good stuff. I think for me, it's so helpful just to be able to at least have what maybe feels like like 75% of the big picture
Hmm.
vision, right? Right? Because how many times do we get into the actual day to day of our business, or we get into Q1 and things have totally drastically changed, and that's not a failure. That's just learning and pivoting along the way. So it's
Yeah.
like I've learned in business not to like it be an unrealistic expectation to try and think that you're going to have 100% of your year and everything planned out. But I think that it's a much more realistic expectation to be like, hey, if I can plan out 75%
Yeah.
of it and then it needs to pivot along the way, at least I've still got a plan. I've still got a dartboard that I'm like throwing targets at instead of just throwing spaghetti all over the dang wall.
That's a good point. I'm trying to remember the conversation, but I had a conversation with a client the other day that said something like that. That was like, what's the point in planning when all this stuff is like, I don't know what's going to happen or all this stuff. And I'm just like, well, oh yeah, I do remember. It's because like they have a couple kids and like they keep planning for things and then their plan gets just so they're like, what? There's no point in even planning. But exactly, I said something, you said it way more eloquently than I did, but something to the effect of like, let's plan as much as we can so that at least if a couple of those things work out, then we're making progress around those things and we'll just, adjust as we need to. But
Yeah.
yeah, is that why you thought of this topic?
What I'm like, what's our topic? Yes.
The
Yes, I was.
compounding of
Yeah,
time.
because I was sitting there. So this was something that came up for me about a month ago. And I was like, this is, you know how reminders pop in for you just at the right time. You're like, if I held on to this concept, if I held on to this thing and reminded myself of it frequently, I I bet it would serve me well. And
Mm,
so like the phrase was just the concept of compounding time. And then
yeah.
so I took like the label maker out, not my label maker, the husband's label maker. Okay, very very
Okay, we know who
aware of
the
that one.
organized one is.
I don't claim the label maker. All right, I know people have very strong feelings about it. Um,
I love a label maker. My daughter
so
plays with the label
that's
maker.
like, oh man, there's so many labels. There's labels for everything, like the sugar, the flour in the house, like the crayons. There's so many labels all over my household, and I'm not the OCD one. I'm not the OCD one. Like but I love him. He's so good for me in that way. But I did use his label maker, okay,
Oh
to
no.
write this
Did you put it
phrase.
back exactly where it was? Because this is going to be a fight
It
if not.
Yeah, well, like I didn't. There were okay. So in the junk drawer when you put something in
Yeah.
there, and then it was supposed to be underneath the pens. Well, but it got put on top of the pens. Then it
Uh-oh.
rolls around differently. I know you're right. I should have just done it the
Yeah.
right way. I
Yeah.
understand
Yep.
now. Okay, so this phrase compounding time. So it puts compounding time. What I'm doing today is building our life 5 years from now.
Oh,
Make it count. And it was just like this concept. So I've really just kept it at the forefront of my mind, even on the days where I know I need to
mm,
rest, because resting is just as
mm.
important. But it's like, okay, what I'm doing today. And so I find myself asking that question actually a lot anytime I start to have feelings of stress or anxiety around the work that I'm doing.
Okay.
Like, okay, is stressing like is stressing about this maybe social media post, or stressing about this application for an event, or stressing about this thing, is the stress associated with that going to, like, how could that negatively impact me 5 years from now? Well, if I create more stress for myself, I'm not going to do it. Or is it, okay, hey, like I can't stress about this. The action that needs to take place is I need to get the post out. Or the action that needs to take place is I purely just need to take the very specific action that needs to get it done, and then move on. And in the background, I know that that action of submitting the application, of putting the post out there, that's what's going to compound right after I get it like out. So I don't
That's
know.
good.
That kind of sounds like I feel like I talked in circles a little bit. You see what I'm saying
No,
now?
well, no, I get it, and it's like these little. So sometimes, I mean, you're saying that it's time, but also I'm thinking about it too, and that it's these little tiny wins,
Yeah.
right? These little tiny, like the time, yes, the time that you're spending on these little things now will compound and add up to hopefully allow you to achieve everything and all the big things that you want to achieve. But it's also, I was just on a call with somebody today, and her list of wins was so long, and I was so happy. And then I told her, I was like, can we just acknowledge this list of wins? And she was like, yeah, but they're also small. And I was like, but no, like they're not. I mean, it's the compounding effect of these small little things. It's the compounding effect of those
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes of reading per day. You
Yes.
know, it's the compounding effect of you know, spending, let's say, 2 hours on the Instagram posts rather than just 1 hour,
Yeah.
right? Or the 1 hour per week that you're spending on the Instagram posts, right? It's like all of these things, whether it's money, interest, time, and also these are different currencies, right? Time is a
Mm-hmm.
currency, so of course it compounds just like money and interest does. um but yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's a really powerful thing to keep in mind, and to constantly remind yourself and other people about is these small little wins, these
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes a day,
Mm-hmm.
right? These are moving us forward.
Yeah. And I think that it helps, to your point too. It it helps generate and continue the momentum.
Mhm.
So it's and it makes it bite size.
Right.
So it makes it manageable.
Right.
So like, just like I was talking about, sure, my 2025 planning, like that's the big dartboard. That's the big general, like, GPS, general destination. But if I can break it down into bite-sized pieces focused around consistency and how am I going to spend these 5 minutes, and then also too, like, having, I think, trust and faith that those 5 minutes that I spent on whatever I spent it on,
Yes.
like, that that whether I was intentional with those 5 minutes or unintentional, they are compounding. They're
Mhm.
compounding in the background, and that
Yeah.
and that there's no way that I can't, like, and I think that goes, I think there's proof of that too. As you're sitting there and you're looking at where you are today, you look back to what you were doing a year ago, and the effects of where you're at today absolutely have something to do with what you were doing a year
Mhm.
ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Ooh, goosey,
I
huh?
don't, why, it only happens with you.
Oh, I love you too, girl.
But I'm connecting so many dots as you're talking. I feel like I'm a broken record about this book by Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, where he's constantly talking about focusing on the fact that you already have everything you want, right? So, and what you're saying is reminding me of that, because, and the conversation I had earlier today was led me to that too. It's like, if you have that lunch meeting with somebody next week, if you have that phone call, if you have that, those two Instagram posts, right? It's like focusing on the fact that you have all these pieces in the next week that are moving you forward, even if it's just a tiny little like step each time, right? It's like the more you focus on what's working, the more you focus on just consistency, the more you're going to get the results that you want. And
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza's Oprah's book talks about that, and that's why I always am thinking about that. But like it's making me think of the podcasts too, right? With I I forget the stat, but it was like there's like a million podcasts
Yep.
that are started every day. Maybe do you know what the
Yeah.
stat is?
Yeah, I think I shared it with you. It was like, well, and now it's changed from 6 months ago when I started my podcast, when I first started, but it's like, it's something crazy. It's like there's 5 million podcasts out there, and only now it's like 500,000 of them or 750,000 of them have more than 10 episodes. But that's still a very, like, that's still a very small percentage compared to 5 million, 7 million, it's a million podcasts that are out there.
Yeah. And there was another piece to that stat that I don't know if you told me or I read it somewhere, that was something like if you keep your podcast going for more than a year, it will be successful, because most people don't outlast a year with their
Yep.
episodes. And so the reason that came up for me too is because, again, the compounding of the episodes. If you just stop worrying about if it's good, stop worrying about if you sound like an idiot, like just get the next episode out, just keep moving that one little step forward with our lives, right? Just show up every Monday.
Just show up. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but just show
Just
up.
show up. And now we've done how
I
many?
think we're like, I think this has got to be 9 or 10,
Nine
which is,
or 10 weeks.
which then, yeah, you look back and you're like, and it, right, you go, oh, you guys have done 10 of them. You're like, yeah, heck yes, that's cool. And then when you go, wait a second, you've done 10 weeks of consistency. You know how freaking bomb that is? Like that shows powerhouse, like the way that we are
Oh,
like flexing
yeah,
that muscle of consistency and constantly doing something that still, I don't know about you, it still feels uncomfortable for me.
yeah.
Like I, not that I don't love, like I love our time together. I get so jazzed up about being here, and I love the conversations, and they so life-giving in so many
Yeah.
ways, but like there's still like a little bit of
There's a bit, because also every morning, guys, on Mondays, we text each other and we're like, oh, but what are we going to talk about? Anything coming up for you? What about you? And like, there's that little bit of anxiety about like, okay, what if I can't think of anything to say about that? Or like, what if we can't think of a topic? Or what if I say something that just like embarrasses somebody else and then I get in trouble for it? I don't have a husband, so I don't really have to worry about that too much, but I'm sure I still do it. But
no,
yeah,
he's
but
used to
it's just, I guess in general, I'm kind of taking this away from the compounding of time
it.
specifically, and I'm sort of associating with the compounding of everything.
Yeah.
But that's just where my mind is going. Actually, I would like to bring it back, and you sort of touched on this when you said something about adjusting your expectations to allow you to pivot for the unexpected.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of, I texted you this morning, or actually like 30 minutes ago, about, the challenge between, when it comes to time, of like
Mhm.
being flexible, especially like when you're working with clients, like being flexible, not going over your time in your meetings, and then also like sticking to your boundaries when it comes to the time, or when it comes to like the services that you have said that you would provide.
Mhm.
It's like, how does anything come up for you in terms of, I guess, those lines or those
Yeah, I
boundaries?
did. I had a couple things actually come through. So like as I was, yeah, thinking about your stuff, I was like, oh, good topic, because right, I could feel it. Like I could feel it for your, I think it was your client who was telling you the story, and I was like, oh yeah, been there. Like where you're trying so hard to, you want to be the person who, like, you're providing a service, so you want to be the person who is flexible for your clients, and you want to over deliver, and especially too if the session is hot, like you want to be able to
Yes.
capitalize on the outcome for them, like
Yeah.
that's, and I think that's from such a servant heart place
Yeah.
too, but at what expense,
Right.
right? right? Like,
Right.
and there, yeah. But what is that costing you?
Yeah.
And it's potentially costing you, like in the past, things it's cost me. It's cost me prep for my next
Yes.
client. It's cost me
Lunch.
lunch. Yeah, 100%. Because you're like, you'll self-sacrifice before you'll
Huh?
won't prepare for another client.
Yeah.
It's sacrifice, like, right, sacrifice just getting up from the desk and walking around, going to the freaking bathroom. I mean, some of your most like basic necessities all of a sudden go to the wayside.
My friend this morning, she was saying that it sacrificed her being able to go to the gym. The one thing that she wanted to do
Mhm.
today, like the one commitment she made to herself, was to go to the gym. And because that client was late, she was unable to go to the gym. Right. And so, like, yes, a lot of times maybe it is a small sacrifice, but if you, again,
Compounds.
compounding of time, if
Mhm.
you allow it, then you never eat lunch, or you're eating
Mhm.
crap because you don't have time to prepare something, or you never get to the
Yeah.
gym because you're taking that one more call when you should be like getting your butt out the door. Right.
Mhm.
So on like a small or zoomed out scale, it's like, yeah, what's the cost? Just stay the extra 15 minutes and give them the answers, right? But ultimately it compounds.
It
And
compounds.
then, yeah.
And it compounds, and I do think that it compounds. I think it can compound both ways too. Like for your client, I do think if
That's
the intention is to over deliver and over serve, I do think that if you're taking that time, that is probably also compounding for them.
wow.
So how do you do both? How do
Wow.
you do both to some degree? And one of the things that came up for me
Wow.
was just, I remember I would do this. There were two things. So first off, if I know I've got a talker, I will purposely, I'm very strategic about it. I will
Yes.
purposely put them right like before the top of an hour or at the bottom of an
Uh-huh.
hour. And then so maybe I intentionally book them, 12:15 to 1 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I give myself that extra
Buffer.
time to say, hey, yeah. So whatever it is, I always make it really easy for myself to be like, hey, I got a call right at 1,
Oh,
or because
oh,
that works for people. They understand psychologically we're all really accustomed to things being scheduled
mhm.
at the top of an hour or the bottom of an hour. So to think that somebody else also has that, really easy for our brains to comprehend. So I got really good at doing that
I
if I
find it
needed to.
better. Yeah.
Yep. And then the other thing, or even too, like purposely, sometimes I'll have I'll have clients who reach out to me like, B, I just had a breakthrough. I want to share it with you. I want to get your thoughts on it. Like, could you give me 5 minutes? I'm happy to give 5 minutes. I'm happy to give 5 minutes because I've seen the power of 5 minutes. But again, I'm going to call your butt at 12:55. And I'm going to tell you that I've got a call at 1. So I'm only giving you 5 minutes.
Okay, that could be one of your next books. The Power of 5 Minutes.
Ooh, look at you. Yes. Ooh, chills, chills,
Compounding
chills,
time.
chills.
Yeah. Yeah. It actually made me
Yeah.
think of Mel Robbins and her,
Mm,
5 countdown or whatever it's called. But the
yep.
power of 5 minutes, that's
Power 5 minutes.
really good.
That's it. I use that one all the time. And then the other thing that came up for me is I do think that for the way I look at it, I feel like I have a responsibility to lead by example from a time management perspective. And I don't feel like it's fair for me to
Mic
constantly,
drop.
yes,
Mic drop.
yes,
Just drop it.
just drop
Slam
it. Just
that
stop.
phone.
Just stop. Right? I just don't feel like it's fair for me to preach to my clients, hey, you got to better manage your time, and you need the things that are like the things that are important to you. You make time or have better boundaries or but then I'm not willing to show up and be like, hey, I've got a call at 1. Hey, I hate to cut you off, but it is 1 o'clock. I got to jump to my next
Yeah.
call. Let's like put this at the top of our list to follow up on, or send me an email, or I'll send you an email, or whatever it needs to be. But I feel like I have a responsibility to lead by example so that it gives them permission to do the same.
Okay. You are forcing me to call myself out hard
Do it.
because I am a walking
Boo.
contradiction. I
Nope.
I talk a good game, but then I don't do the things.
You're
So
not
I,
the only one. I am too. I am too. Like, and again, right? We can relate on this because
yeah,
we've both been on both
we
dang sides. We have
do.
both been the people preaching, and we have both been the people like, okay, we're 17 minutes past our call time here. Like,
Mhm.
we've both been those people.
But
Like,
that's so good. And I don't know, I feel like in the last couple of weeks, I have even said pretty much what you just said to people,
yeah,
yet I'm not doing it. Like I've said, so you're talking about in a professional setting, right? Where it's our job to create the example for other people to hold their boundaries, like
yeah.
to respect their own boundaries, but also with personal relationships too. What I've been saying lately is like, the more you I think I did even say it about time. The more you respect your own boundaries, the more other people are forced to, I mean, I don't know if they're forced, but
They
they will end up
are
respecting them.
totally.
Yeah.
And even too, like I know we've seen something that's coming up there is like even in personal boundaries, how it's like, hey, listen, we are going home at midnight. Like, don't ask what. Okay, if you ask, maybe we will stay until 12:30. But after that, I am going home at midnight. That's the plan. So it's like there's the joke made, and then of course midnight rolls around, and you're like, listen, it's midnight. I told you my like line in the sand was 12:30. So let's start saying our goodbyes
Uh-huh.
now. But
Oh, that's good.
again, like, so I think that there's ways that it doesn't have to, you don't have to sound like a raging witch because you have boundaries. Like, I
Oh, but that,
think you can have
but
like a
okay,
good,
wait. We still have 9 minutes, so I think we have enough time to now dive into that. That was a perfect segue because my friend this morning, she was like, I set a boundary. The boundary was you didn't show up on time. I'm not waiting. But
oh
then
yeah.
she immediately felt guilty. She felt like that raging witch. And so, yeah, it's like, well, I guess I don't even know what my question is really. I guess like,
Guilt.
how do you deal with the guilt? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you stop being a people pleaser?
Oh, anything come through right away for you on that one?
Uh,
Yeesh.
just, just stop. Just,
Just stop.
just hold. Yeah, just hold
The famous
steady.
words of Melissa, just
Guys,
stop.
it's simple. Just don't do it. Just
Just stop. Yeah, I think the guilt is like, so I used to yeah, I've coached on like guilt specifically in a module once, and what it was like what helped me a long time ago, especially because mom guilt. As a new mama, I toyed with mom guilt
do
for a
you
couple
still
years.
have mom
I
guilt?
It's rare. It's rare for me to
Write a
have
book.
mom guilt. It's
Write a
rare
book.
because here's the thing. I just did it for a couple years before I was just sick and tired of always feeling guilty about. And you're like, this is serving no one. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, it really just come down to like anytime feeling that guilt of, hey, I should be doing this with the kids, or I think I should. Anytime I catch myself with that kind of stuff, it's just going back to like what's the root cause here? What's the value? Like what's the foundational value that I'm actually um putting time and effort towards? So like
Yeah.
I know one of the last times I felt guilt, um it I can actually remember it was over this summer, and I was on the back patio working on, I was putting podcast stuff together, and I had just launched it, and I knew I needed to get podcast stuff out because that's what I had signed up for, and that's what I wanted to do. While also too, it's the middle of the summer, and so Shane was taking the kids to the park. It was like, well,
And you had to say no.
I want
Yeah.
to go. I want to go to the park too, but I equally wanted to work on my podcast, and both of those are okay.
Yeah.
And it was just it was like, hey, wait a second, and I think that that's part of this compounding time thing that we were talking about. It was like, wait, the 30 minutes that I can spend on this podcast, the what it's just as important to my family. This isn't like a me
Mhm.
choosing one or the other. It's just as important to my family to to send this message via this vehicle, this podcast vehicle. So and that helped. That helped. So getting everybody on board with like, what is mom doing? Mom's not choosing to work over going to the park with you. That's not at all what's happening. Like it's that this is what's best for our family right now, and I'm okay with that.
Oh my God. That's such a great like way to have that conversation in your mind
Yeah.
about because I feel like that is a constant conversation. I feel like you're always having to choose and pick something over the other. Something's always
Mhm.
getting compromised, and like learning to really be okay with that on,
Mhm.
for the most part.
Yeah.
And to not punish yourself for not having 16 hands and being able to be in 4 places at once. Like,
You're so right. Because that's what it is. It's a punishment. It's a
yeah.
punishment. And then we're sitting there, we're punishing ourselves, which then how does that compound into how we
And
show
then,
up as moms?
right. And then how does that help you show up for your new business as like, with the enthusiasm and the motivation
Yeah,
and inspiration that you want to show up with?
it
You
doesn't.
don't, because you feel guilty. So the guilt is going to flow through.
And I think that too, like for your friend too. I think I think like just recognizing the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the guilt probably, personal opinion from very afar, because I don't know the full situation,
Yeah.
was just like, I bet that there was a little bit of guilt, like self guilt, like because she knew she wasn't going to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Also guilt because she said no to someone that she wants to support. Like
Right.
so
So it's
I
like
think
you're a failure in all
all
things. Yeah.
all things, which then, right, like choosing to, hey, I also know what helped me with guilt was just being really honest about it.
Yeah.
So even in that moment on the back patio, talking to Shane, like, hey, I feel guilty. I
Mm.
feel guilty. And I've said that with clients before. Hey, I feel guilty that I have to cut you off at 1 o'clock. However, I just know that we've got to stay, within these time frames. And I know this will help you consolidate your messaging as well, which is a benefit for you too, a greater benefit.
Mm.
So
That's
just
good.
calling out the guilt. Oh my gosh, I feel like there's so much freedom in that alone too, right?
Oh, that's so good. You always have so many tweetable moments.
You, if you want to start a Twitter for me, let's go, girl.
Oh, because that was one of your things
Yeah,
too. All the
I was
different
like,
social
oh
media
god.
platforms.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, the guilt. I don't know. So like with your do you have any other like tools that come to mind when you're talking about just keeping, like, managing your schedule, sticking to your schedule and managing it without feeling the guilt, and also with probably creating some buffer time
mhm.
in, like, that's probably like intentionally creating buffer time so that you
Yeah.
can go over or go under, and then at the end of the day how your buffer time is spent. So if your call didn't go past 105 but you planned on it, how did you use those 5 minutes? Were you intentional with them?
Oh,
Mhm.
that's so good. That's so good.
Mhm.
Yes, buffers. I
Yep.
try to have at least 15 minutes in between every meeting. So like even if I was doing something like what you were talking about, like scheduling it so that at the top of the hour I could be like, or the bottom of the
Yeah.
hour, or whatever, I could be like, okay, actually I gotta jump off right at 1 o'clock or whatever it is. Um, I would still then have 15 minutes because it's also, there's a lot of like energy that is like either given
Ooh, yeah.
or like received from people in meetings, and sometimes you just need like 5 minutes to decompress or to like kind of
Mhm.
cleanse the energy. So like I would say I could be more intentional with how I use those minutes in between meetings,
Minutes.
but I think that's really the biggest thing for me, is just to be able to like kind of clear my head a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about the energy exchange before, and I think that's a real thing too. And I think that we owe that to our clients,
Absolutely.
right? Right, like because they're paying us for like the best version of ourselves,
Mhm.
and if we're still sitting in the last call, then they're not getting 100% rest. And so I think it's okay even too. I used to think, hey, have buffer time, but don't tell anybody.
Right,
But
right.
now, yeah, but I've changed that. Like I have no problem telling folks, like, hey, I can go over 5 minutes, but then I need the next 10
That's
minutes to
good.
prepare for my next meeting.
Yeah,
And
it's just for
yeah.
you, it sounds like the communication, like being
Mm-hmm.
able to just communicate very clearly what it is. And I think I could probably do more of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
That way, because again, if you're not communicating it, then you're sitting there with like anxiety. You're looking at the time and you're like, oh, okay, I gotta go. Oh, no, stop talking. Like, right? Instead of just being like, okay, finish this thought, but then I really got to jump out of here. You know?
Yeah.
That's really good. Tips. Okay, one last thing, because again, look, I'm pushing your boundaries.
Oh, sure
my
you
boundaries.
are. Huh? No, remember, I gave myself 5 minutes.
See, this is the problem, guys. But you mentioned like tips for calendar,
Yeah.
and what I've started doing is, especially, I mean, it's easier during the holidays, but what I've started doing is blocking off a week at the end of every month. And I know not everybody can do this, right? Because people have full-time jobs and
Mm-hmm.
they can't literally just take a week off of every month. But I block, or so maybe it's not a week, but it's like maybe it could be like a certain day a week, or maybe it's your Sunday, every Sunday, right? You block a chunk of time where you just know this whole week or this whole day is going to be focused on X, my
Yeah.
business, the podcast, whatever it is, my family, right? That way you don't have to feel guilty
Mm-hmm.
for spending that time, because everybody knew, right?
Yep.
Everybody knew my Sundays are for the podcast.
Yeah.
Or what.
Yeah. And I think right there, what you just said, everybody knew. Like you communicated it, which meant that it just made it so much easier for everybody else to respect your boundaries because they knew what they were.
Right.
And I think sometimes we're like, oh, we'll schedule Sunday, we'll schedule Sunday for ourselves or for whatever, but then we don't tell anybody. And then we get angry when somebody wants to throw something on your calendar and you're like, well, they didn't know.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, the communicating. Oh, my
Okay.
friend, as always, so good. And I'm so proud of
Hey,
us.
me too. We could have taken this for another
I know.
hour.
So good. Same time, same place next week, right?
See you then.
See you
Bye,
then.
everyone.
Bye, guys.